Live from Joe's mom's basement, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and today we're diving into the world of dreams and how not to delay them until retirement. And to help us, we welcome a woman taking a break year with her family. It's the woman behind Ordinary Sherpa, Heidi Dusek. Plus, the guy who's always happy to take a look at a rash for me, Doc G. Hey man, thanks, by the way. It's almost out of that one last crevice. And finally, a guy we can't seem to keep out of the building, Len Penzo. But that's not all. Halfway through the show, I'll share my operatic trivia question. And now, a guy who travels all around the world collecting the best personal finance advice for you and won't shut up about it. It's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Did I tell you I went to Bali, Doug? Did I tell you?
For God's sakes.
Did I? Hey, everybody. Welcome
bolt
to
could only strike me now.
Traveling for the Win podcast. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And what a day I've had today, Doug. We were supposed to record this an hour earlier. And an hour before that, I'm sitting at my eye doctor getting ready for the appointment. And I go, oh, crap.
You voluntarily gave up one of your five senses. Why not?
I might not be able to see anything. So luckily, though, we were able to get the band back together. So thank you to all of our participants. So let's meet these kind individuals. We'll talk to our guest of honor last. Let's start deep under Los Angeles, where in his bunker, Mr. Len Penzo joins us. How are you, man?
Great. You know, I had a colleague. He was 35 years old. He went to the eye doctor, and he was 35, and that's when he found out he was colorblind, if you can actually believe that. It took him until he was 35 years old. The guy was shocked. It hit him right out of the purple.
Oh, it was so funny, Doug. I thought that was a joke, and then I'm like, "Oh, he's not kidding."
He wasn't.
And then it turned out
better deliveries. Well done, Mr. Penzo.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you very much.
Starting to get better at that. And Mr. the gentleman with us from Chicago, just north of Chicago, where he and I ate dinner a few weeks ago at a great restaurant. Doc G is here. How are you, man?
Well, I'm a little worse off because they just announced that restaurant is closing and it's shutting its doors. They're closing and they're shutting their door like at the end of the week.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with Joe being one of their last customers, but
right. There is no correlation to me coming to Evanston, Illinois, and that restaurant closing. No correlation at all. And the woman who, frankly, the only reason we had her back was to see if she actually was coming back from Alaska or if she got attacked by bears. Heidi Dusek is here. How are you?
Hi.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Yes, we are back from Alaska, but there are many crazy stories from that place, I tell you.
I got to say, I loved following you on social media. And for people who want to follow Heidi, which you should, we will link to your social media stuff on our show notes page. But it looked like a great time. But for people that don't know what the heck we're talking about, you took your family out of school, out of everything they did. Talk about the gap year you're doing right now.
Yeah, gosh, we're on the tail end, it feels like. Starting in January, we pulled the kids from school, took an intentional break from work and life, and have been traveling around the country in an RV. It's been a wild ride. It's been really interesting. So just to give you like a flavor, though, of Alaska, it rained 40 of the 60 days we were there.
Oh, wow.
We had an earthquake, a tsunami, and I don't know how many wildfire evacuations, which is interesting when like you don't exist in their systems. Like, what's the text number for like, where am I supposed to check in if I'm safe? I don't even know. Oh. So crazy stuff, you know, off grid, isolation, all that kind of stuff. But then also like really amazing communities and like making friends in parking lots and hanging out. And it's been so fascinating to see life in a totally different perspective.
Heidi, I love my children. They are 28. I loved them when they were your kids' age, but living with them every single second of every single day, there must have been days where you wanted to put one or two of them out next to the road.
And I love my children too. So I do think there is this out, in the RV, yes, it's like 327 square feet. Not that I've measured, but we know that anytime like someone is driving us crazy, we have the outside. Like we can always stop, get outside, go somewhere, do something. So while we do have our own spaces in the RV, the outside is a beautiful place and it's usually pretty calming. So that helps all of us, maybe me more than others, but.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you're safe and the family is safe and you guys are, have made it almost to the finish line of this year. We're going to talk about that today, specifically not doing the thing that most people do, which is delaying gratification, instead doing the type of thing Heidi's doing, taking gap years, taking time off, speeding up the clock. So let's get into it. We've got Heidi here. We got Len. We got Doc G. We got Doug. But before that, Heidi, do you remember the rules from last time you were here?
Nope.
No? Okay, we got to go over those first. So hold on a second, everybody, as we give Heidi the rules. So that's some of them, Heidi.
And that's because of the lawsuit, Joe?
Well, we usually don't talk about that. But hold on, there's just two more. Hold on. And that's how we got around the lawsuit.
Gotcha.
So Heidi's here, Len's here, Doc G, and Doug. So let's get this conversation started. Here we take some inspiration from a piece by the Pioneers, which the timing here is fantastic because they are people who are living their dream right now. They're living in a converted van, not down by the river, but all over the place. They're going to be pulling into my driveway, in fact, in a couple days, which is cool. And Heidi, you were just speaking at their conference. The Pioneers had a conference about this very topic.
Yeah, in beautiful Winter Park. And I don't know if you'll ever be able to schedule peak color again, but that was in like a nice little touch that we all arrived in these beautiful mountains and it was peak color change. It was gorgeous and 40 amazing people.
That's fabulous. Fantastic. And what was your talk about?
Well, I was on a panel where we were trying to expose people to different lifestyle design. So I think it's slightly unique that people do this with kids in their mid 40s as opposed to, younger childless individuals. So I spoke a little bit about how do you make your home a destination of choice. I talked a lot about our joy audit and really how do you prepare emotionally, not just financially, for something like this.
We're going to talk a lot today about that third part. How do you prepare emotionally? Because I think a lot of people aren't in the right space to even get there. The piece that we're referencing, you don't have to have in front of you, but if you want to, head to our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. It's called Don't Defer Your Dreams Until FIRE being financial independence, retire early. And this is an interview with a woman named Ingrid, and they actually walk through Ingrid's goals and what she's thinking about. But the place that I want to start this conversation with, let's go into this for each of you personally. So for you, when did you realize that delaying gratification longer wasn't going to work for you? Doc, let's start with you. When did you kind of, this piece starts off with this woman talking about how she got on the financial independence train. When did you get on the train and go, you know what? I think this is going to be about more living for Doc G and his family.
I think that for me came very late, maybe like it did for Ingrid. I was very much the old school financial independence, retire early advocate, right? Those early people who were talking about this in the 2000s really brought up this idea that work is anathema and we are going to grind it out until we have enough money to then quit. And so I kind of followed that role model. I worked as hard as I could. I made as much money as I could.
Get that savings rate to like 70, 80%.
It was very high. And then I also pushed up the earnings, right? So I was working 60, 70-hour work weeks and taking calls in the middle of the night. I ran my own practice. I covered all my own calls 24/7. I mean, I was really, really working a lot, but it created a financial bounty. And so I definitely deferred gratification. I said, well, I know that I can save as much as I can right now. I can make a lot of money now. And that one day that'll give me freedom. Interesting, because I also realized that my father died at 40, well before he hit financial independence. So that should have been one of those kind of warnings. But for me, I always felt like I was going to live a long time. So it was fine to grind it out when I was young and healthy and the kids were young and it felt like the right thing to do. It was only afterwards where I looked back and said, you know what? I didn't have to do that. Like I could have found much more of a sense of purpose, maybe worked part-time, maybe spent more time doing the part of medicine I liked, which was hospice and palliative care. Maybe that could have taken up a much bigger part of my professional activities. I might have taken longer to retire, but I would have enjoyed it more. I probably wouldn't have burned out of medicine. So it was only unfortunately after that I think I really came to realize that.
Len, you retired earlier than a lot of people retire, but you really had a normal, I think, what people would consider normal progression, right? Work for a single employer for a long period of time. But I remember a story you told me a while ago where you kind of, though, mentally got off the train. You're like, you know what? I'm not interested in advancing in the company. I'm interested in rounding out my life. When did that switch happen in your head?
Yeah, I was probably, I was definitely in my 40s. I probably mid 40s is I guess is where it was. Is I got tired of I was working on my vacations and my kids were getting older and I was like, this is ridiculous. The amount of money I'm doing this to make more money and get better raises, and I was like, it's not worth it anymore. It's I'm going to do what's expected of me. I'm going to do more than is expected of me as well, but on my terms, not on the company's terms. And I was much happier after I did that. And I also decided I was going to stop trying to climb the corporate ladder at that point as well. I was like, I'm satisfied. I'm content. I make good money. I don't need to be the richest man in the world or whatever, be CEO of the company. And boy, it was such a release and such a freedom that came over me when that finally happened. So I'm just sorry it's a little late. I'm sorry happened a little late for me.
So you wish, like Doc, you would have done it earlier.
I do wish I really do. I think I missed out on a few things that I shouldn't have missed out on if I wasn't charging so hard.
Heidi, comparatively, when we talked to Len and to Doc, you certainly pulled the trigger much earlier. I know Len's talking about planning vacations. You're like, oh, honey, vacations, hold my beer. Right? I'll take a whole year. I'll see your vacation and up you by a lot. When did you make the mental change that, you know what, I'm not going to delay this?
Yeah, I think part of it is seeing all of you go before me and saying, gosh, there's a lot of stuff I want to do and that I know my body won't be able to do in 10, 15 years. I mean, I'm only 40. I never remember how old I am. I think I'm 43. This is a bad sign, right? But I was already starting to feel like I'm not quite as fit as I used to be. I'm feeling like things are sore, whatever. It's hard to complain about that now, but then I see my parents who worked so hard all their lives and retired and kind of aren't doing the things they wanted to do because their bodies aren't able to. So I had that on one end. And on the other end, I have my kids who are 13, 11, and 7. And there's so many things I want to do with them. And I know like I've got this window of time that, gosh, in 10 years from now, when they're out of their house or doing whatever their lives look like, they're not going to want to spend as much time with me. And so I've got this like unique golden opportunity to really leverage the time. This year, I guess, is the time that my son decided was when we were going to go, because it's the place where we're healthy enough. We can ski hard if we wanted to. We can bike hard. We can hike. We can do all these things that we still love to do, and do them with our kids.
It's so phenomenal because I'm going to misquote this study because I didn't know we were going to go here, but I believe the study showed we're going to have maybe, if we have children, we're going to have maybe 18 years with them our entire life. And most of those years are going to be before the time that they're like, we'll get all the first 5 years, and then it slows down until they're 18. And by the time they're 18, we're only going to get to spend maybe cumulatively another year or two with them the rest of their life. And so to front end load that, Heidi, I don't know, have you seen that study?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I couldn't quote it.
Yeah.
But I've definitely seen it.
I'm in the ballpark there. So to think about that ahead of time, like you're not going to get those years back. Right.
And all I kept seeing is like time is going so fast, right? Like I went to that retreat and I swear I came home and my son's voice changed an octave and I was like, I was gone 5 days, like what happened here? So if we can figure out, and I think we kind of have, like, how can we actually slow this time down a little bit by spending more of it with them?
Well, you saw how much time has changed with us too. I mean, you were here, 3 months ago, and Doug's voice has changed an octave. So it's happening happening all over the place. Doc, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, you don't have to worry about it, Heidi, because kids nowadays are moving back for another 10 years after college anyway. So you're going to get plenty of time with them.
Got to remember the old extended records, the ones, Len, that were, the extended replay. Heidi's going to get that too, which is exciting. They start off with this introduction with this woman, and she talks about her goals. Once she gets to the point that she has enough and she feels like she's comfortable, she has begun setting up goals. Her goal is to learn a new language every 2 years and to get conversant with that language. Now, Heidi, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, that's cool. But I think that's it. And I don't want to be judgy about somebody else's goal, but I'm not sure that you can build an existence around just learning new languages. Or Doc, do you think you can?
Oh, yes, I definitely think you can. So I'm a big fan of this idea that purpose actually probably shouldn't be goal-oriented. In some ways, I think that's toxic and dangerous. And we've seen
What do you mean by that?
Well, the problem is a lot of people have these big, audacious goals, right? For some people, it's a little bit more selfish. I want to be a billionaire. Or for other people, it's like, I want to do something and change the world. I want to cure cancer, or I want to affect as many people as possible. While that sounds wonderful, a lot of those things are kind of out of our hands. Like these big, audacious goals, we do not have nearly as much agency to change them as we think we do. And a lot of times it has to do with luck and being the right person at the right time. And so when you set these huge, audacious goals out there, you're very likely to fail them. And when you fail them, it causes anxiety. And then you're like, well, what is my purpose? And I thought was my purpose is not going well and it's not feeling good. So I think we should do the exact opposite, especially if you find yourself in a good financial position. Your sense of purpose and how you spend your time should be based on what brings you joy and fulfillment. And so if learning another language brings you joy and fulfillment, I think that's wonderful. And I think it's a really good way. And when it stops doing that, when the process of doing it is no longer enjoyable anymore, it's probably time to move on to something new, because we have a very limited amount of time we were just talking about in our lives. And so to me, winning the game is filling that time with as much meaningful and joyful and purposeful activities as possible. It's not a goal. It's not getting to some end, because we found that when you kind of shoot for an end, usually when you get there, you actually find yourself empty as opposed to fulfilled and fearful that you either are going to lose what you were shooting to gain, or you kind of double down and say, now I need to do double whatever that was because I've lost my sense of purpose once I've reached the goal. So I very much agree with these kind of what I would call little p purpose, this idea that purpose should be much more process oriented and much less goal oriented.
Yeah, Joe, Doc taught me that a few years ago. So now that's why my big goal in life is just to finish the whole basket of free bread at the restaurant before anybody else can get to it.
How's that going, Doug?
Oh, I'm crushing it, dude.
Oh, good.
I'm absolutely crushing that goal. Makes you feel so good about yourself.
We're not seeing any difference in your waistline. No. We really aren't.
Mom is so proud. Len, you on that train?
You know what? I don't have any end goal. If that's, I'm just doing what I enjoy, and let me tell you, I'm enjoying it so far, and I'm not running out of anything to do, and I'm not bored, and I've got plenty of, I'm busy, so everything's good right now. So I think it's kind of hard when people retire early. That's one of the things. Like, man, if you retire in 40 or 35, it's like, man, life is so long. It's like, what? I mean, you got a lot of life to fill up. So I think it's quite a challenge to retire early.
This is why, Doc, I'm not on that train, because just all the studies that I've seen back when I was with American Express, we did all these retirement studies, and the average person, when they get to whatever retirement is for them, they have 18 months of euphoria. And then after the 18 months of euphoria, there is this deep depression that I would say 85 to 90% of people go through. I mean, you see it all over the place. And whenever I talk about that, people come up to me and they go, yeah, I felt that.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's 2 years.
You're actually proving my point, actually. So you're totally proving my point. The reason why is people are so caught up in this idea that they have a big, audacious purpose. And after 18 months, when they realize that this big thing they're supposed to accomplish and do isn't there, it actually gives them anxiety.
Yeah, but the second half of that discussion is that it actually, where the longing goes toward, is what Len talks about, retiring early. When my dad retired early, he was 30 and out from General Motors, started when he was 22, retired when he was 52, right? He started hanging out with dudes that were 20 years older than him because everybody his age was still working. And what we long for, every study I see talks about this. In fact, there's a great episode we did on our Stacking Deeds podcast, is community.
Yeah.
The purpose is enveloped in being a part of a community. And by the way, if it's hyper local and not online, it's much better than if it's online.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, for us, we got to get it where we get it.
Joe, you're proving my points over and over again. So the point is, by having these big, audacious goals you can or cannot accomplish, you're not really building community. But if you look at doing things you enjoy doing and you're very intentional and joyful about doing it, you tend to build a community around you, right? So if you love gardening, maybe you start gardening around your house and other people notice. And then maybe they ask you for some tips and you go over to their garden and show them how to do things. Or maybe you join a gardening club, or maybe you write a blog, or, become a podcaster. All of those things are connections and community, which come from purpose, but they come from this sense of joyful purpose.
I don't think I'm there.
The lady who's we're speaking about, the topic, who was interviewed here, she's learning these languages, and I'm thinking, man, you know what? If she can learn 2 more languages, she has an extra skill set that she could exploit down the road as an interpreter or.
But why would she want to make more money when she already has enough money?
Well, does she?
Especially if that's not something that's joyful to her. Well, isn't that a waste?
Okay,
you only have a certain amount of time in life.
Well, maybe she does have, I guess she has enough money now, but I mean, that's another thing when you retire so early. It's just, there's so much unknown out there that I don't think she can say that she has enough money. I'm sorry. She might have enough money right this minute, but I don't think unless she's got a 8-figure, 10 million in the bank right now, I don't think she can be that confident that she's going to be well off at 65, 70, 80 years old.
She did mention a safe withdrawal rate of between 2 and 3%. So, you're talking about world wars and things like that have to kind of knock down let's say a 2.5% safe withdrawal rate. You gotta really need some, even if you're talking about 50 or 60 years. When you get to that low on your safe withdrawal rate, it's pretty hard to knock someone off.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying it's easier to retire when you're older. I mean, it's great to retire when you're younger, but boy, when you're older, you've spent a lot of your life already, and you don't have as much runway in front of you, and it kind of makes retirement easier.
But it makes it easier on one end, but on the other, we talked about the time equation, right? You can't get that time back. That's the tough part.
Well, that's the trade, right? That's the rub. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Heidi, jump in here. Do you think that learning languages is enough?
Well, if that's what brings you joy, I am a little bit on Jordan's bandwagon here, because.
So then you're wrong too.
Well, when I think about it, the things that light me up aren't the same things that lit me up at work. And it's not as much of an emotional return for me to get dollars in the bank, right? I get more excited sometimes now when I get $100 on a podcast coaching than I did getting $1,000 working at work, right? Like the return on that investment, on my time invested in getting the outcome, is not the same. It's not like comparing apples to apples. It seems different, especially now. There's another thing I don't think we talk about at all when we talk about like sequence of return risk, or even in planning out your FI number, so to speak. And that is, you can also use compound interest on your time and on your health, right? So if we start to think about
Fabulous.
What is my health going to be like in 20 years? And is that going to be the runway that I want? I mean, what's the point of longevity if I'm going to be miserable, right? So maybe I do live to 80 and I retire at 65 or whatever. Well, those 15 years, I'm a miserable old person who isn't well. What was the point, right? I guess there's a piece of that in the time and energy equation that we don't often talk about.
And I absolutely love that, because I feel like we do spend a lot of time talking about money, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about our health. And I think they're incredibly intertwined.
Oh, for sure.
Just amazingly intertwined. You know, the place where I get frustrated, Doc, about this discussion is just that everything shows that community is where it's at. Like, I have yet to see a study that says that. And by the way, for the introverts out there, they're like, no, I can be just fine by myself for decades, right? And I'll be good. But every study also shows introverts need community, just in a different way. We still need that, just as humans. The problem I see in society, Doc, is that we don't seek that out. We tend to put people away. And let me give you an example. I'm a guy who likes football. That Terry Bradshaw is a guy who's on the shows before the games. People that don't know football have no idea who Terry Bradshaw is, but he's on before the games. And how old do you think he is, Doug? Maybe 80?
70s?
70s?
No, I think he's very late 70s, if not 80. He's 78. Yeah.
Last week he said some things on the pregame show, and Twitter or X or whatever the hell you call it blew up with, shouldn't this guy retire? Isn't it time for this guy to retire? And basically what we're saying is, because of his age, we should put him out to pasture, right? We do not, as a society, for older people, seek community. We put them in a box. Let's move them away from community. Like, all the things that we do not act. I think, Doc, when you talk about joining a gardening club, that sounds cool, but I think we have to actively seek that out, and our society doesn't have us do that.
It's just because the old people smell funny. That's why we want them to be over there in the box. I mean, if we just give them some deodorant, cool, bring them in.
I mean, I think, Joe, you're confusing retirement with not working, because they're two very different things, right? Retirement is saying, you know, I'm leaving work, I'm done, that's it. But the truth of the matter is, I think we do work our whole lives, whether we're getting paid for it or not. And so a lot of people who are in the quote unquote FIRE movement might leave an employed job where they're getting paid by an employer, but then they continue to do work. Some of that work is joyful. Some of that work is for money. Some of that work isn't, but it's all work. And
so that's not this woman,
Terry Bradshaw,
and is learning two languages, language every 2 years enough. Work. And I'm like, no, I don't think it is.
I mean, I think that's a form of work. Now, whether you're getting paid for it or not is a whole nother thing. But it is something she does that keeps her busy, that she's excited about it. Why is that more or less positive than going to a 9-to-5? If your only difference is one you're getting paid for and one you're not getting paid for, but if she doesn't need the money, then that is her form of work. I prefer not to even call it work. That's her form of purpose. That's what she's doing that's bringing her joy. I think the fault is that too many people are doing this thing from 9 to 5 for 40 years of their life. They're calling it work, and that gives them an excuse to do something they hate. Whereas she's flipping the whole switch, and she's like, well, I'm doing my work, but this work is purposeful, and I've gotten myself to such a good place that I don't need to make money to support it, so I can do that work whether I get paid or not. I think that's exactly the point.
And I will chime in and say, on the community side of it, Joe, I think we're less comfortable with things that are less predictable in general. So if we retire early, we don't understand where our community is going to be, or if we have to seek it out. One of the, I don't know what you would call it, but one of the like big things people have asked me is like, are your kids socially, are you worried about like social isolation? And I'm like, no, you should see who my kids talk to. And the community that has developed that I wouldn't have been able to predict by doing this big, crazy experiment, so to speak, is much more enriching than having them in school in a very predictable, systematic environment. And I won't know what the repercussions of that are for years to come, right? It'll be interesting 10 years from now to look back. But I think when you talk about people that aren't in this traditional retirement path, that whole community conversation changes when we don't understand the predictability of what community looks like.
Yeah, if you're looking at your job as your source of community, that's pretty lousy, because most people, they leave their job and they lose touch with the people they work with. It's an artificial community based on the fact that you're in the same place, same time, working for the same employer. On the other hand, when you take people who have taken money out of the equation, in this case, they're just doing things that are purposeful and that they love doing, those communities tend to be much more long-term. They tend to support people through different stages of their lives. They tend to be a much more transactional community where you gain and learn from being involved with them and they gain and learn from being involved with you. And in fact, I'd tell you it's even more impactful because when other people see you doing something that you are authentic and intentional about, you impact their lives. And by doing that, that actually has a much longer term legacy than going to a 9-to-5 does.
I don't think there's any debate there. I'm not even sure how we got here because my direct question was, is learning two languages enough? I still think it's not. I mean,
maybe what you're trying to say is it's not for you. But it probably is for her.
But we're going to talk about why Doc G's wrong in the second half of this discussion, because right now we're going to move on to trivia. For people that are brand new to Stacking Benjamins, we have a weekly trivia contest between our three usual contributors, which are Len Penzo, my co-host OG, who's not here today. And it's weird because Doc G, last week you were playing for Len. By the way, Len, he won for you. And now,
oh my goodness, thanks, Doc.
Now he's got to beat you by playing for OG. And then Heidi, you're playing for the amazing Paula Pant. And so, Heidi, that means you've got some good news and some bad news. Which one would you like first?
Bring it. Bad.
Well, the bad news is that Paula's tied for last place, but that's actually partly good news, as our longtime listeners know, because Paula's usually not tied for last place. She's in last place by herself. and Paula has had a heck of a run. She's so brilliant at so many things, but trivia usually is not it, except this year she's on fire. So good news for you, because of her history being in last, that means you get to guess last. So you have 12, OG has 12, Len has 14, as we've got maybe about 7 weeks left, I think, in this competition. So getting down there, Len, you can pull ahead by a bunch today, but we need a trivia question. Doug, what's our question today?
Hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. Heidi's travels have really inspired me. Lately, I've been thinking about gutting an old van and remodeling the inside for adventure. I can put up some wood paneling, maybe some deep shag carpet, surround sound. Oh, I can even hang some Christmas lights, put them on a
what you guys did? Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Doug. Isn't that what you guys did, Heidi?
Nope, not at all.
Well, you're missing out.
You missed out because mood lighting is the key to any room you can recline in. Nearly 5 million people in the U.S. have jobs that allow them to work remotely. I think I could get used to a nomadic lifestyle. Just me, alone, thinking about my loneliness in the bleak, vacuous darkness with nothing to distract me from the emptiness of my future. It'll be great. On second thought, maybe I'll become a pilot so I can cover more ground. I've always wanted to fly to Australia to visit my hero, Crocodile Dundee. Speaking of Australia, today's trivia question is... Nailed it. Today's trivia question is, what is the total capacity of the main concert hall of the Sydney Opera House? I'll be back after I explain to Joe's mom what I meant when I said she really gets around.
Yeah, that's a great conversation. Fantastic.
Didn't go like I planned.
Conversation with mom. Good work. Lots of Australian dollars. They don't call them Benjamins, though. What do they, for our Aussie listeners, what do you call an Australian $100 bill? I'd love to know that.
Dollars. They're dollars. They are. Well, I swear to God, that's...
I know $1, but what's a $100 bill?
100 jackaroos. I don't know.
I wasn't even asking you. Doug jumps in there, voice of authority. Len, you're going first, man, as our leader. So people spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go to symphonies at how many seats?
That's that place right there on the water, right? The Sydney Opera House, the really cool architect. Wow, that's a good question. Well, let's see.
I bet it's more than 4.
God, is it? Yeah. You know what? The number, I wanted to say 10,000. I mean, that sounds like a good round number. And because I think that's a good round number, I'm just going to go with that.
10,000. Doc, you think that's high or low?
I'm thinking that's high, I think. So I think it's high. I'm going to say 6,000.
Well, Heidi, what do you think? You got 10, you got 6?
I feel like that's still, gosh. Okay. So we've been to concerts. It's an opera house though. Like, aren't those supposed to be a little bit more intimate or something? I don't know. Not high class over here. I'm going to go with, wait, is it like, I can't go over, right?
No,
I gotta
you
be
can
the
go over.
closest.
No,
I'm
you
going
can go
over.
over.
Oh, I can
You
go
just want to
over?
be closest, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I could be a doofus here. I'm going to go with 3,000.
Oh, I thought you were going to do it.
She didn't Chelsea Brennan me.
No, I was going to, but then I was like, that's cheap.
I thought we were about to hear the $59.99, which is what Chelsea Brennan would have done. But Heidi's not doing that. All right. We've got 3,000 is Heidi. That's your number?
Yeah, 3,000.
3,000 for Heidi, 6,000 for Doc, 10,000 for Len. Let's see who's right. We'll be right back. Len, you kicked us off with 10,000. Apparently, both Doc and Heidi think that is way too many. What do you think now?
I really don't know. 10,000 was just sticking in my head. It's got to be a bigger number, though, I think, because have you seen that place? I mean, it's got to make money,
big.
right? Is it? Yeah, I mean, but you think it has to make money,
from
too.
the pictures. Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. 10,000. I'm sticking with it.
Doc, you're now sandwiched in the middle, but Heidi was very nice to you. So you got a little room. You feeling good?
Yeah, I'm feeling Heidi was good to me. Yeah, who knows? Like, I went with Heidi's reasoning. Opera houses tend to be smaller, even though, yes, it seems like a huge structure. So I went with a number that I thought even was higher than a normal opera house would have, but still not crazy.
Heidi, were you guys singing opera around the campfire when you were in Alaska?
No.
Probably not. No.
You don't want to hear any of that.
Did you do campfires? Did you do any campfires?
Honestly, we hardly ever do campfires because there's nothing worse than like campfire smoke in your closet, right? You can't like wash so no, we don't do campfires that often. So no opera here.
No, but you feeling good about the 3,000 number?
Yeah, and I feel like I kept my integrity and I wasn't even a jerk about it.
That's very, very nice. Although on this show, I think you can feel very comfortable.
There is no integrity on this show.
You don't have opportunity.
I wasn't saying
That's why
that.
I'm the rookie.
All right.
Cannibalism here.
Doug, who's our winner?
Well, Joe, I'm not just going to come right out and tell you, but what I will say is I am world traveler and budding opera singer, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. I'm making a list of all the careers I can pick up that might take me to Australia. So far, I've got pro surfer, koala trainer, and comedian. Of course, there's a lot more than that, but those are the three I can think of that I'd be best at. And today's trivia question was, what is the total capacity of the main concert hall of the Sydney Opera House? That was the key to that question, the main concert hall. While there are 3 separate theaters inside of the Opera House, the main concert hall is the biggest, and Australian comedian Jim Jeffries, fun fact here, is the only person to have sold out the room both as a comedian and an opera singer. That means that each time he's sold an impressive 7,231 tickets less than what? No. Shut your mouth. Shut it. Zip it. Zip. Zip. 7,231 tickets less than what Len guessed, 3,231 tickets less than what Doc guessed, and just 231 tickets fewer than what Heidi guessed because the capacity is 2,769. Nice.
Wow.
Fantastic, Heidi.
You are welcome, Paula. Way to look. Paula's not in last
and she
anymore.
maintained her integrity,
Yes. There's hope for humanity.
Team Paula, one away from being in first place. What the hell's going on this year?
The first loser now.
Can you call Paula right now and just tell her she's close?
We should. She is in
Girl power.
She is in Scotland visiting our friend the Mad Scientist right now. But I will text her as soon as we're done and say, guess what?
This is breaking news for her.
Guess
I mean,
what
she should know these things.
Oh, she's going to be Over
I'm
the
sure
moon
she's
ecstatic.
just thrilled.
That's all she's going to talk about now for the next 3 minutes.
Probably come right home.
Yeah, right.
Time for the second half of this discussion on getting to your goals earlier and not delaying. Second half of this discussion, Heidi Dusek, is brought to you by depositaccounts.com. You know what happens when you go to depositaccounts.com?
What happens, Joe?
It's like, I can't wait to find out. When you go to depositaccounts.com, you can compare more than 275,000 deposit rates from over 11,000 banks and credit unions, all for free. We're recording this a little early, but listen to this. At the time of our recording, when it comes to savings accounts, the national average rate that you might have on a savings account is 0.47%, less than 0.5%. But if you're in the top 1% of savings accounts, it's 4.89. When it comes to CD rates, the top 1% average 5.72, where if you're looking at the national average, it's only 3.92. How do you get those rates? Well, you go to depositaccounts.com, then you click on where you live, and it will compare all of the top rates, and you can decide which one's for you and make more money. Depositaccounts.com. Isn't that amazing?
That is fantastic. What an awesome tool.
Well, also fantastic is the fact that we were talking about goal setting. Let's get a little bit tactical. We can maybe get off the fact that Doc G's getting this completely wrong. Instead, let's talk about tactics. Heidi, you've been living this lately. Anything you didn't expect with your not so much early retirement, but break year? What is something people should look out for if they're looking to take a break year? Something maybe unexpected that they didn't know about?
Yeah. I thought I was going to go into this. I have a podcast and I thought, well, I'll just blog about it. Like, I'm going to be so excited. I'm going to want to share it. I was tired. Turns out we were all exhausted. And the first couple of months, we really just like went to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, I think people thought we were like living the high life, but at the same time, we were doing that from, like 10 to 2 on a Tuesday. And then we'd go to bed at night. And I was surprised how much we slept, especially the first quarter. I was also surprised that what was once fun became work really quickly. So you will fill the time, any space that you have, you tend to fill. And when you don't focus on the things you actually enjoy, it becomes work. And then, so that led me to actually take a break on the podcast too, just to enjoy what was happening before me. Instead of feeling like I needed to keep everybody else in the loop, I just took a break from everything for a while. And I think the third thing that really surprised me was how quickly we adapt to what is novel, meaning like it's new and different and we move every like 5 to 7 days. After about 6 months of that, my kids were like, okay, it's not cool anymore, Mom. Like, we're sick of each other. Can we please like go do something cooler? And it was like, we always had to up the ante. So that was pretty interesting too. I was like, holy cow, we're still moving a lot. We're still doing a lot of really cool things. Part of me wanted to be like, do you know what other kids are doing back home? But I tried to restrain a little bit. I still used it though. I mean, far from perfect here.
It's funny, when we were nomads for several months, I found that I wanted more studying. I didn't want to go to a new place. Like, I didn't want more novel. I wanted more same in my life. And so it's funny how individual that is, which is why I love what you're doing, Heidi, because you're play testing what the family likes ahead of time, instead of like when I would work with people on their retirement goal, they would have all these shiny things they thought were great. And then they get there and they weren't fulfilling like they thought they would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting now because we're talking about like what happens after this year, because we're going to go home. Right. And so how do we make home a destination of choice as opposed to like leaving on vacation all the time? Like we've done that for a year. How do we actually be content in our home and be comfortable in our own community and find the things that we loved about gap year and bring it home?
Len, yours wasn't a gap year. Yours was I'm now in this new phase of life. What has surprised you that people should look out for?
I don't know if I have any real surprises at this way. I mean, everything that I expected has happened. I am actually looking at my expenses a little more closely. Maybe that's natural, but I think if you've planned out your retirement well, there really shouldn't be any big surprises that I would think. I mean,
but not even on an emotional level.
Well, I will say this: I lose track of the days, and you know, honest to goodness, I don't know if it's a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Wednesday or a weekend. And that's kind of neat, actually. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore. That doesn't. It really is cool on a Sunday night. It comes around, and I'm not stressing out about going to work on Monday and something that has to be done. I mean, that the relaxation it has been, and the lack of stress has been phenomenal. I guess the only other surprise I have is on the good side, and I have learned since I've retired in the last year, I have learned quite a bit of things. For example, you know, I have my model train, and I actually I realized in this community, this model train community that I had joined, I found somebody gave me an idea to do this 3D printing, the stereolithography. I know, you know, 3D printing for some panels on my train, and I have one right here. I'll show you. I actually had to learn a new modeling tool and an engineering modeling tool, and I had to learn how to do it. And I mean, I spent 80 hours figuring out getting the tool and learning it and all this good stuff. And I ended up building these things, you know, that are made out of plastic. But, you know, I mean, it was cool. It's like being at work again, and I was enjoying myself. I mean, I've learned a new skill, and it's absolutely
almost like learning another language, Len.
Almost like learning another language. And to that aim, let me say this: that's one of the things I had on my list too. Is identical with hers was to my rusty Spanish was to actually become fluent in it, and I haven't even got to. That's one of the things it's on my list, and I have not even. I've been so busy with other things, learning other things, that is not even. I haven't even attempted that yet. So I don't know. I guess I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't add anything to that other than I have no surprises. And I think if you plan well, if you really think about your retirement and don't just say, oh, I'm going to retire, I have this X dollars and go for it. If you plan for it and think about your retirement for a good couple, 3 years before you do it, I don't think you're going to have a lot of surprises.
Oh, the thing that drove me crazy was I'm going to travel and I'm going to play golf. Like, and that was all the thinking people wanted to do. I'm like, no, we need to get a little more granular about what you're going to do. They're like, no, I think I could probably do those too. I'm like, I don't think you can golf every day. And people would go, oh, I think I can. Mm-hmm. I think I could golf every day. And then, 3 weeks into retirement, they're like, yeah, guess what? I can't golf every single day. Doc, you still work as a hospice doctor, but I know after financial independence, you do it to the degree that you love it. You do it part-time. What changed for you? Did anything change for you emotionally? Was there anything you saw that maybe you didn't expect?
Well, certainly. I mean, retiring didn't solve really any of my problems, except that I got to not do something I didn't enjoy, right? Like, it didn't really solve any of my life problems above and beyond what problems were caused by work, right? So I knew that I didn't want to be in medicine anymore, but because I had spent so much time being in medicine, it was the only identity and purpose I had ever really focused on. So I had to completely, in a sense, recreate or at least come to terms with a new sense of purpose and identity, maybe a sense of purpose and identity that were always there, but I was ignoring because I was working so much. So I had to get much more in touch with myself, which was not necessarily an easy process, right? There was some stress. It was very stress inducing to be like, okay, I can stop work and I don't like work anymore, but what the heck am I going to do with my time? So I think it's important to realize that, retiring or stopping work only solves that one problem. You still probably have lots of other life problems. It now gives you more time to work on those other life problems, but they're not going to just magically go away.
Heidi, for somebody that wants to take the year off like you did, saving advice, because I think saving for that would be a big part. You can't just all of a sudden stop work and go, okay, I'm good.
Nope. Wouldn't suggest that. It's not the plan I would go with. So that might be option 17. But the option that worked best for us was having a good 2 to 3 year understanding of what our yearly expenses were, and then aiming for the high end of that. So we did a lot of experiments of, like, if things went off the rails, what would that budget like? So for example, we decided to take something like 40 days in an RV during peak gas prices when it was like $6 a gallon or something. And I was like, this is going to be a good stress test for us to be like, how do we feel spending $6 a gallon to fill an RV that gets roughly 6 miles per gallon? Things like that. So we had a good understanding of roughly a year's worth of expenses. Then we use that as our goal number. We tried to live off of my salary, save my husband's salary as much as we could. We had a couple of saving tools in place, and then we had kind of the backup plan, right? So this is our first line of defense. What's the backup plan? And knowing the different tools that are available. So in our case, we had a 457 deferred compensation plan that was in our tool belt. That was great because we don't get penalized for early withdrawals. Knowing that you can withdraw from your 401k, your Roth, your contributions can be, so like understanding what options are available when you're not of retirement age was really helpful too, just to think about how to work through all of that. And that gave us a target. And once we got there, then we had to work on, okay, are we really doing this? That was probably harder. And then are we actually going to spend that $457 for what we had planned on? Or should we just start working and making more money? I think that was the other option too. Like, should we just get jobs along the way and work remote while traveling? All of those things, the mental stuff that goes with it is pretty tricky.
In practice, have you spent as much money as you thought, more or less?
Less money than we expected.
Less money. That's good.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Hey, real quick.
Len, for you.
Real quick. Let me bring something that has been mentally good, helping my transition. I built a big cash reserve after I retired. So I'm burning down that cash reserve before I go into my 401ks and my IRAs and all my stocks. I'm not liquid. Those things haven't been touched. And I think that's mentally, that's been very added to my peace of mind because I'm not drawing down from those accounts. And if the stock market's dipping and going down, I'm not feeling stressed that I have to pull money out. So it's nice to have that cash reserve and burn that cash reserve down first. It's just mentally, it's been giving me peace of mind.
Len, very briefly, when it comes to Social Security for you, are you still looking at deferring that as long as possible to keep that building, or are you going to take it early?
No, I'm going to hold off until, and everybody's are going to say I'm stupid, but I'm going to wait until I'm 70 if I can. Yeah, I'm going to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you don't know until you die whether you made the right move.
I know. Well, so the bottom line is, you run the numbers, you're going to get the same amount of money whether you take it late or you take it early. So you're betting on, how long you're going to live, really. That's all.
Well, I do like the idea of betting on yourself to live longer. Yeah. That's a good bet. Bet on me. Doc, fill in the blanks for you. How have things changed with investing, with saving for you?
So they haven't changed a huge bit for me in the sense that my wife is still working. So we have some income. And even though I've kind of retired from things I have to do, I still have some income from things that I do for joy and pleasure.
Is your goal to have her continue working so you can be more financially independent?
No. I've actually been asking her to leave work for the last few years, and she's trying to decide when she's ready to actually leave work. But we probably spend more. Actually, I looked at what we've been spending over the last 6 to 12 months, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money you're spending. So we've actually loosened the reins quite a bit, which I think makes us different than most.
It's so interesting. I think the big takeaway there is how individual this is, but also I think a big takeaway is just how much planning really goes into it. It can't be, I'm just going to go play golf or travel. I mean, Heidi, how many bears did you see, by the way?
Black bear or grizzly bear?
Oh, well, that's a flex right there.
I think we saw 9 grizzlies and something like 22, 23. Oof. Actually, no, I think we were in the 30s. I think we hit 30 on the black bears.
Wow.
Yeah. That's some pretty intense, like cool encounters too.
I think that's what you need to plan on is how many bears am I going to see? That's it. All right. That's going to do it for today. Doug, we're going to skip the community calendar today because we're recording late and Doc G's got to flee the place here. But let's talk about what's going on in your communities. We'll have our guest of honor go last. Len, what's coming up at lenpenzo.com, my friend?
Well, I did a greatest hits of my national versus store brand challenge. If you want the Cliff's Notes of 13 years of those challenges, I go over the 5 worst performing store brand items. If you've ever wondered,
the worst performing,
the ones where, you get what you pay for, you better stick with the national brands.
Because you're surprised that in a lot of cases, the store brand comes out really well.
Oh, and probably more than half the cases the store brand comes out very well. But I've went through all of my challenges, more than a dozen over the years, and I pulled out the 5 worst performing products that were store brand that you should stay away from.
I'm going to put my name back in the hat, Len. The next time you do the ice cream taste test,
Joe's there.
I want to be there. I'm getting on a plane. I'm going to LA. I'm coming down to the bunker, and I will test ice
You're
cream,
on.
which, I mean, you guys will regret because I'm lactose
I was gonna
intolerant, but I
say,
will love it.
I hope you have some ventilation and fans set up in the bunker, Len.
It'll be great for me, but maybe not great for the honeybee. Doc, what's going on at Earn and Invest?
Well, coming up Monday, I have Maya Korbick, who wrote a book, From Piggy Banks to Stocks, The Ultimate Guide for the Young Investor. And we talk about kids and investing.
Kids and investing. Heidi, thanks for hanging out with us again. And I'm glad that 3 months later, you're still alive. Number one. That's fantastic. But what's coming up on Ordinary Sherpa?
Yeah, so we're transitioning back within the next, well, we think we are. Actually, we're going to spend a little bit of time at home to decide what is next. We may continue traveling. We may ease off a little bit. So there's a lot in store. I think the podcast is probably the best place to stay in touch, or on the email list. You can hear all the crazy stories about what's happening on a weekly basis.
You talk about your time in Alaska. You interview your husband, I think, on one of the episodes recently. And our good friend, Brad Barrett, is just on the show.
Yes. Brad's one of those longtime friends and inspirations behind a lot of the things we did with travel rewards and stuff like that. So it's always kind of fun to see how different families can be, but still very inspiring.
Yes. Well, he's inspiring to me because he loves board games like I do. So he's a super dude. All right. We will link to all of those on our show notes page. But I think, Doug, you're going to handle that as well in the credits. But before we get to the credits, what should we have learned today, Doug?
Well, Joe, first, take some advice from Heidi Dusek. Set big goals and don't wait on them. Time is a diminishing resource you can't get back. Second, on the other hand, if the big audacious goal creates anxiety for you, maybe take a page out of Doc G's playbook. Set the bar low and just be happy. In other words, C's get degrees, baby. But the big lesson? Maybe I won't move to Australia. I just learned everything there is trying to kill you. I mean, even the koalas carry chlamydia. Hand to God, those cuddly little bastards are hiding a dirty little secret. You can't trust anything down there. Thanks to Heidi Dusek for joining us today. You'll find the Ordinary Sherpa podcast wherever you're listening to us right now. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Doc G for hanging out with us today. You'll also find his fabulous Earn and Invest podcast wherever you listen to finer podcasts. And thanks to Len Penzo for joining us today. You can find Len at lenpenzo.com/only suckers make podcasts. I just appear on them so other people do the hard work. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2023, and is created by Joe Saul-Sehy. Our producer is Karen Repine. This show was written by Lisa Curry, who's also the host of the Long Story Long podcast, with help from me, Joe, and Doc G from the Earn and Invest podcast. Kevin Bailey helps us take a deeper dive into all the topics covered on each episode in our newsletter called The 201. You'll find the 411 on all things money at The 201. Just visit stackingbenjamins.com/201. Wonder how beautiful we all are? Of course, you'll never know if you don't check out our YouTube version of this show, engineered by Tina Eichenberg. Then you'll see once and for all that I'm the best thing that ever happened to this show. Once we bottle up all this goodness, we ship it to our engineer, the amazing Steve Stewart. Steve helps the rest of our team sound nearly as good as I do right now. Want to chat with friends about the show later? Of course you do. Mom's friend Gertrude and Kate Youngkin are our social media coordinators, and Gertrude is the room mother in our Facebook group called The Basement. So say hello when you see us posting online. To join all the basement fun with other stackers, type stackingbenjamins.com/basement. Not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show.